I'm Diane King. On behalf of the League of Extraordinary Revisionists, we are here in Toronto, Canada, to interview Germans for their story. We hear constantly in every venue the story of what did or didn't happen to the Jews. So we want to hear what happened to the German survivors who survived Allied atrocities. We have here Christian KLEIN. Welcome, Christian. It's very good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Would you please tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from?
Okay, I come from Germany, from Silesia, and that's now Polish, or at least it is considered to be Polish. It has never been decreed by a peace treaty, but the Poles have taken it over according to the Potsdam Conference. And I was born in a small town, and I have a picture here of this. This is my birth town. It's called Wünschelburg in Silesia, and it was a town of 3,000 people. So that's where I was born, and my happiest times were with my grandparents because they had a house at the periphery of the town, where we had free roaming areas. We could run into the forest, and we could climb the mountains, and because this is an area that is surrounded by mountains. And the family moved to the city of Breslau, which the Poles now call Wrocław, in 1938. That's where I continued my school until 1945, 19th of January, just as the Russian front came closer. We were aware of what's going to happen, because we heard from East Prussia what had happened there when the Russians came in, and as many people as could would flee. So we were lucky to board one of the last trains out of Breslau, which went back to where I came from, this place here in the mountains close to the Czech border. And that's where I was born. My parents were born. My grandparents still lived there. And we experienced there well, first of all, Breslau, the city of Breslau, was declared a fortress, and kept fighting against the Russians for 4 months until in April 1945 it surrendered. And that of course brought the Russians further west, and they also came into this area where we were with our grandparents, our birthplace. We saw the last German troops going through, and they left all kinds of equipment behind. The Russians, and one night I went out of the house and I looked up the street, and I saw some shady figures on tanks, and I thought, this must be the Russians. So I went back in and said, the Russians are here. So everybody was upset, and now of course we had the women had to hide. That was the main thing. The women had to hide because the Russians were given free, especially by a propagandist, a Jewish propagandist from Moscow, by the name of Ilya Ehrenburg, who told the Russians, kill, kill, kill any German, any dead German is a good German, and do not hesitate to kill women, children, and everybody. The Germans deserve it. It's for the Russian fatherland that you do that. this is what happened to the women, and they went into hiding. We were lucky. I mean, I'm a person who should not even be relate my experience, because the people in our town and in Breslau, they were in much worse conditions, and they experienced much harder things, especially in January, in the very cold January of 1945, when many women exited on foot from Breslau with their children, with their small children. Many babies died, froze to death. They were left in the snow. They were buried in the snow. So this is what we avoided by coming out by train, and experiences the invasion of the Russians. We had at the backyard of my grandfather's house, which was next to the Catholic Church, we had occupation of a Russian small group of soldiers, and surprisingly, we were not molested. My sisters, my mother, all the women went hiding in the hay, went hiding in the fields. They often stayed overnight there, and so we were spared the worst. But many women, many girls were raped. So that was the experience with the Russians. In fact, the commander of this small group, and when they left, my grandfather had a restaurant. When they left, he smartly stood at the door and greeted us a goodbye, and that was the Russian officer. So you see, Russians and Russians, they were not all the same, but they said, "Oh well, we will send the Mongols in, and they can do whatever they like to do." Then we experienced a short time of nothing happened, but gradually Poles came in. They came by a train. We have a small train coming into our area, and they came in greater and greater numbers. And every house got a supervisor, a new owner. The people came in and they said, "Well, we are now the boss. What kind of rooms do we have in here?" And they looked at the best room and took it. And the owners, the Germans, could move into the side rooms, or were kicked out altogether. What happened then, of course, was that the Poles that came in were of the worst type. They were murderers. They went into the houses, they took everything that they wanted to take, they robbed the people blind, and much of that what they took, they shipped back to Poland. So many of these houses were practically devastated, and the people that resisted, they had no chance. They were brutally mistreated. They were hit with whips, and they were and some of our people were shot. I was in the. Then of course we had people that were in the Nationalist Socialist Party. They were pointed out by those Polish or Ukrainian or whoever farm workers that had been working in the farms during the war, that had come from there. They pointed them out and they said, "Here, they were in the party, so take them." So there was a place in our district capital, the city of Glatz, where there's a street. There was an administrative building, a street called the Zimmerstrasse, and in the basement there were horrible things going on. The people were shipped from all area over, and they were tortured and murdered. that was our Polish experience. Then suddenly they came with a befehl which said here, the Germans have to leave in 15 minutes. 20 kilogram of belongings you can take, and the rest is has to be left. They took that, and that was posted in various places. They came with militia soldiers with guns and said, "Okay, out, get out." So the people in a great hurry got whatever they could find and packed it up. And the moment they were gone, there was a seal put on the door. They were not allowed to come back. So gradually they formed into big lines of carts, hand carts, but the surrounding farmers also provided, and these were Germans under Polish rule, they provided horse and buggy, and older people could get on there and sit and be transported to this district capital of Graz. Well, they took everything, any values that you still carried. If you had good boots, you had to take them off. If you had a leather jacket, you had to take it off. Fur coat, it was taken. So we went through there and had to sleep overnight on the bare floor in the school building, and the next day we were sent to the cattle train and shipped out. 4 days trip to the border between what they now consider the Polish part, the Neisse Oder, and we ended up in the city of Torgau, where we were deloused and stayed there for 2 weeks.
Was this still in Poland?
That was then we were in the German side.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah. I mean, we still considered Silesia, Schlesien German. We did not think, and at that time we thought we would come back. Many of these people thought, oh, they would be coming back. So that was my experience at the invasion.
So you were dumped on the German side. Now, with what year was that?
That was in I should explain that too. There were different stages of expulsion, and this is how we were shipped. We were put into the cattle cars, and what we see in the picture here, that happened in March of 1946. So the expulsion in our area didn't start until 1946. But the Poles kept the skilled workers back. So some people in the administration, and especially tradespeople, they were kept back. Miners, especially in Upper Silesia, they were kept back. And my grandfather happened to be a master tailor. So the Poles found that he could work for them. And the people that we got into our house, or my grandparents' house, was they were decent. They were decent. They did not molest us. They did not treat us badly like some other Poles. They were beating the former owners, or the owners. They were beating them up, and they were doing bad things. So we went out in exactly the same way, but here we have, this is in March, and that was worse. We went in October. In October came the next group, and that was a little better because the weather was not so cold. But, I mean, on the train, it was a horrible situation. You had to sleep on the bare floor, old people, sick people, children, small children. They provide a pail. I mean, they didn't provide anything for going to the toilet. So the people who had taken some pots along, they were asked to provide them for whatever had to be done. And so it started to get very smelly and
It's an
very,
unpleasant
very,
trip.
very awful, yeah.
When you were
And
in,
some people died, some old people
oh,
died
wow.
on the trip, yeah.
when you were living before, okay, this is 46, this is the expulsion. When you were living in your hometown during the war and all that, did you hear of any rumors of rounding up of Jews or
No.
or National
No.
Socialist criminals
No,
of some
no.
sort?
I'm just reading again this book, the story of the expulsion of my hometown. And it is very interesting to me.
What does this say?
It distributed in all the through the wind, blown away by the wind.
Okay.
Fortgeweht alle Winde, blown away by the wind. And this is the people. So here this fellow tells about a Polish worker who had been working in the farm through the war. He met him in an isolated place in the field, and he said to him, well, why are you treating us like that, and what is going on, and why are the Poles so hateful? And he said, well, we are taking a revenge. These people are taking revenge for what happened in Auschwitz and in Treblinka and in all these camps. And he said, what is that? So he had never heard of, and we had never heard of that, what was going on. And that got to the people in such a way that they said, oh, if that is the truth, then of course, this is what we have to expect now.
So they accepted it.
Yeah.
They didn't question that it might not have occurred.
They had no idea. They did not. They lived in their own little surrounding. They lived on the farm and whatever. They did their work, and they were totally unaware of what was going on. I mean, the television at that time, or the radio, Wochenschau it was called. They showed the war scene on the Eastern Front, later on the Western Front, and they showed that, but the rest of them was never shown. So whatever happened or what did not happen, the people had no idea. But they were made feel guilty. And this is what happened to today.
That's right.
They still feel guilty,
Yes.
because of that, okay? About what they were being told. And whether it happened, we see from the, I mean, we have experience now. We're looking back into the First World War, and we see what the kind of propaganda was going on then against the Germans in order to bring the United States. And we see what kind of, and you did it in your TV show. You did an excellent job. I was not aware that the same was going on in the United States as was going on in Canada, because they were telling the public, well, here the Germans hacked off the children's hands in Belgium in the First World War, and they nailed the women on the barn doors, this kind of thing, and killed the nurses and all that. And nobody has ever felt to excuse themselves for that up to this day. So this is why the city of Berlin here, which is now Kitchener, changed from in 1916 in September from Berlin to Kitchener. And there was a group of soldiers coming into the city that through the Kaiser's bus, the Emperor Wilhelm, was in facing Queen Victoria in Kitchener, a sculpture. They threw it into the lake, and the Germans pulled it back out, put it into the Concordia Club. These soldiers came and devastated the interior of the Concordia Club, and I don't know if they have ever found the Emperor's bust up till today. So this is the propaganda that was going on then, and now we see, of course, that was the propaganda that went on in the Second World War, and we recall what this chief propagandist of the British, former German from Berlin, Sefton Delmer, said to a Professor Grimm, in 1945, when he said to him, well, we won the war through our propaganda. And Grimm said to him, well, you can stop now, okay? And he's, no, we were just beginning now, because until the Germans are taking this over themselves and don't know what they're doing any longer, then we can say the war has been won. And this propaganda has to be tended like a fine English lawn, with tender care and love.
And so they keep at it. They're still doing it.
Yeah. So this is what.
That's right.
This is how our people were totally not informed about what went on.
They're misinformed.
But I like to say that the revenge, the so-called revenge, was brutal. Because in all of Silesia there were 1,000, and in the Danube-Swabian basin there were a few thousand concentration camps where civilians were put in. They were picked up on the street and they were put in there and tortured and killed. And this fellow here, in which the Jewish author John Sack wrote about his book An Eye for an Eye. This guy, Shlomo Morel, he personally killed maybe up to 1,000 people in the camp of Swintoklowitz in Upper Silesia. And the Polish wanted him, he escaped to Israel. The Polish wanted him extradited because there were enough witnesses to witness against him. But Israel said no. We don't
Extradite?
No, we don't extradite him. Shlomo Morel, yeah, because the most of these concentration camp commanders were of Jewish origin, even though I must say that when in my hometown we had this commandant who brutalized the people, who was the first one to assume control of the town with his gang. When he suddenly we had enough loot, he left. He disappeared, and on came a Jewish guy who was the mayor, and this guy was tried to help the people. He said, "Oh, he was in the concentration camp," but he tried to help the people. This is described here in this book, in this story. So you see, there is the great difference.
He was responsible for a lot of the deaths.
Well, we don't know that, because we only found out after the fact that many of these commandants of the camps in which the Germans were tortured and murdered were of Jewish extract. So this came out after, when people started to tell their experiences, what had happened. And John Sack describes it very, very thoroughly in his book, what the reason was. Okay.
This says Poland hunts Jewish commandant. So I suspect that it sounds like this vengeance mantra is something that they were saying and acting.
They were imbued with it. We had another camp here where a few thousand people were murdered, also in the same region, Upper Silesia, Lambsdorff, the place was called. And they also tried to get this commander later, when the Poles established an administration, when all this looting and murdering had come to an end, and when there was nothing to be had any longer, they tried to do some justice. And this guy, Czesław Gaborski, he was 76 years old then. They wanted to put him in front of a court. During the trial, 138 witnesses are expected to testify. Okay, but whether he was Jewish or not, I cannot tell you. They said he was a Polish guy from the Silesian city of Katowice. So these were the things that went on in those days. And
what happened to you after you arrived in Germany? Then what?
from this camp in Torgau, where actually the Americans and the Russians met, they embraced each other there. Okay. From that, we were transported by train to into Saxonia, Saxon, into the province, and dispersed into the countryside. We ended up on a farm, a large farm. My mother, her 5 children, and our aunt that had come, and 2 other people from the same town. They had come with us. So we settled there in this small town called Besedau in Sachsen, and we only stayed until the next year. Then we crossed the border in the middle of the night into the West, because that was the German Democratic Republic. At that time, not called that. At that time, it was the Soviet zone. That Germany was divided into 4 zones: the American, the British, the French, and the Soviet. So we got out of there because we thought nothing good can come here. And sure, I mean, even then, they used the prisons there to round up the people that had been in the party, in the National Socialist Party, and they were tortured, they were murdered. There were places that were, well, awful. Bautzen is a name that comes to mind, and but okay, we got out, and
so now you're in Western.
Yeah, we came to the
Germany.
West. So we made several trips across, because of course we were lucky. We had relatives in the West, and we made our way to Heidelberg. First of all, we had to go through the internment camp in Karlsruhe to wait for Zuzugsgenehmigung, which is to be allowed to settle. A piece of paper is given to you after, and we stayed there for half a year. So we stayed half a year in this place, and I have it all written down in my book. When the first year, the second year in Canada, which is actually exactly 60 years ago, I started to write my memoirs.
Why did you pick Canada to migrate to?
I only came here to see the world, to make some money, to go to school in Germany.
And you had the wherewithal, the ability to come here, or did you?
Well, I happened to I mean, my school was shot during the war. Okay? The school was closed when they started to bomb Breslau, and I lost 2 years of school altogether. I didn't like the atmosphere, because suddenly everything that formerly was good was now demonized. So everything that and that atmosphere repulsed me. I thought, well, I better go to that village school. How old was I then?
How old were you from the time that you finally were allowed to settle in Germany, and then decided to come to Canada?
How old was I?
Yeah.
22.
22. Did you resume your college education?
Well,
here?
no, because I took a trade. I became a cabinet maker. But to do that, I needed some money, and that's where I came to Canada, to make some money. And also, I wanted to see the world. I learned another language. First, I considered France, but that didn't work out. So I applied to come to Canada, and I was accepted. And in 1955, I came here.
So,
61 years ago.
How did you get involved in the revisionist effort? Here you are, a budding renovation specialist, and
yeah, but well, first of all, my first I came here for 2 years, and it took me 2.5 years, and I went back to Germany.
Did you?
Yeah. But you see, the economic miracle had not happened by that time, so I had a girlfriend then, and we corresponded, and when I came back, she wanted to know more about Canada, and well, so she convinced me, and it was, in fact, at that time in Germany you could not find, as I said, the economic miracle had not started. So I said, well, why not? Let's get married and go back to Canada. So that's what we did. In 1958 we came back.
Okay. Okay.
But I did not get involved in the revisionist. I had my memories of what went on, because and everybody in Germany was the same. They could not continuously think back of what had happened to them. They had to build their new existence. And so did we here. We came here. I took a night school. First of all, in my first 2 years, I went to night school to learn English. And I'm sorry, at Harvard and Jarvis. And that's where I found out that the name I until then carried, Jürgen, the teacher could not pronounce. He said Shaker. And I thought, oh, I don't like that. But on my birth certificate, my first name is Christian. Nobody called me Christian in Germany. They all called me Jürgen. So I said, okay, my name is Christian, and that was easy to. So I went pronounce. When I came here, a guy picked me up from the immigration and took me to Downsview as a carpenter, and I started nailing boards on the roofs of the houses in Downsview. Until my hand I couldn't bend my fingers anymore. And the guy said, oh, well, you're too slow.
So
Goodbye.
would you please go ahead and fast forward it a while and say, well, you're involved in and are responsible even for the responsible for the German community in this area. You've taken a real shepherd-like approach. How did that happen?
That happened after my retirement. Then, when I visited my homeland in 1981, I started to become active with the German expellees. So we went on a bus trip from Germany to Krakow, to Breslau, we drove into my little place here. I took even a taxi from another spot to go back and to visit again. And so that's when I became active in the
What caused you to do that? What made you want to return to visit at a time in your life when you wanted to forget it? Oh, now you're going back.
Oh, I had never forgotten, because I was in close contact. I mean, my brother was active in the. I was active in Germany in this youth organization of the expellees the youth group. Okay, we did this. We did camping, tenting, and that got me involved. And this is why you see here, this is myself here. This is myself here. And okay. This is myself.
So you were involved in a lot of
that's why I became a teacher. I was a youth leader. I had a youth organization, a group. Okay, we did folk dancing, singing, folk singing, and three sports, athletics.
It sounds like you were attempting to maintain your culture.
Yeah. And so that I kept this contact with my friends that were active in the group here with Germany all the time. That never.
How did you realize the mistreatment? At what point did you realize there was a mistreatment of the Germans, and that the Holocaust was at the base of it, was the power that was afflicting your people?
That was a slow process, because I saw what was written in the papers. Continuously, the Germans were blamed for everything. And I wrote articles. I can show you. I wrote a lot of articles to the papers, and finally I noticed that there was a guy here in Toronto by the name of Ernst Sindel, who had a conference or two conferences in 1985. I was in Australia in 1988. I was too involved with my school, so I did not attend any of that, but I read a lot of it, because the daily papers reported what was going on there.
In the trials.
Yeah, and when they finally put him in jail, I thought, well, there's something going on here that is really evil, because the man has not had any violence. He had lived here in Canada for 40 years, has raised a family, has given employment to all kinds of people, and had an advertising agency. And he also was questioning. He was distributing a booklet which was called, came from England, which was called "Did 6 million really die?" And I never even read this booklet, but I read what the papers talked about it. And then when this man was put into jail, I thought, well, what kind of freedom have we got here? What kind of freedom of speech have we got here? So this is when I became more active, and yeah.
You began to research even more things yourself. Yeah. Did you ever read the booklet? Did 6 million really die?
No, not yet. Not yet. But I read many other books, and I informed myself. The fall of the wall in East Germany, and in 1989, and everybody thought, well, now things will be improving, and then they had this agreement, which was called the 2+4 or the 4+2 agreement. And suddenly they decided, well, until then there had been no peace treaty, but Chancellor Kohl and his foreign minister Genscher, they decided, well, we can give this up to Poland. So it was decided that this country is now, and we cannot go back. So at that time, we formed a club here. We formed a club.
Can you read that?
Yeah, it says here, Society of East German Heritage, Ostdeutscher Kulturverband. The society was founded in 1992, a year after a treaty called the 2+4 Agreement was signed between the representatives of the two parts of a divided Germany and the victorious allies of World War II, the United States of America, England, France, and the Soviet Union. It then became clear that the millions of Germans, 15 to 18 million, that were expelled from their ancestral German lands in the East after 1945 would not be allowed to return home. Members and friends of the society come together at monthly meetings to exchange information about their experiences as well as about the developments in their homelands and to keep the heritage alive.
Say, like, what exactly are you doing now? Because I know you're involved in a lot of things.
Well,
right now.
I should mention that my hometown, I mean, where I went to school, where I last went to school, the hometown is Breslau. Breslau is now, this year, is the cultural center of Europe. So they have big celebrations there, and they have invited everybody to come back who has ever lived there.
Are you going?
No, this is Schlesien heute, which is a magazine which is published at the border, Polish or Silesian West German border in Görlitz, city of Görlitz. One thing which keeps us informed, and there are advertising there. All these many castles that were in this country, they're being rebuilt. Okay, there's a lot of money that has been going to the Poles. And they have now very good highways. We traveled these highways, and
It's just really pretty.
And so many people have gone back. From my birthplace, the group that these people from every town and village, the people that had come to the West came together again to meet, to exchange their experiences. And the group that from my place that happened to be in Westphalia, most of the people went to Westphalia. And they come together there, and they put things together. They put trucks together with materials to drive back to the town from which they were expelled, to help the people there, so that at least the roof of the church would not deteriorate any further. So there's still this great interest in their place of origin. They don't want to say, oh, let's all forget about it. Yeah.
So you might say that they are interested in rebuilding, but they do not really understand, or maybe they don't want to understand what really happened in World War II, why they are in this position, and what they're fighting, what they're still having to fight. even though they don't know it.
No, the fighting spirit seems to have gone out of Germans, whereas we see fighting spirit in Poland, where now the people are being encouraged to take up arms, even the civilians, to form partisan groups. We see the fighting spirit in the Islam, and we see the fighting spirit in Israel, okay, in the World Jewish Organization. They are all ready to fight for their world. For their world, they want to control the world.
Yeah.
Not the Poles. They want to control Europe, but Islam wants to control the world, and Zionism wants to control the world. So there we have a totally different picture from what the Germans used to be. The Germans had a fighting spirit, okay. But 60 years of affluence has put them to sleep. Politically, they don't count politically in the world. They are under the American influence. Okay, their folk, their cultures. They are now accepting the people from wherever they come from, and there are apparently 65 million refugees on the road right now at this time. And Angela Merkel, the Chancellor, said, well, the door is open. I think she's surprised by, not so much by the Germans, but by the surrounding European countries.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they're being invaded just as well. I mean, in Sweden, the situation is dire. In France, it's bad. I just read on the internet, a French former general says we are close to civil war in France.
Interesting.
So the situation is really bad, and in Germany the same thing will happen. There will be clash, okay, and I think what we call the New World Order is actually promoting that. And I see in the United States they seem to be promoting racial violence now.
Absolutely.
And I see it here in Canada. I have printed up a paper where they show a white man, and they posted it on streetcars, a white man telling a Muslim woman with not a veil, but what is it called?
A hijab or...
Hijab, yeah. Go home where you come from. And her answer is, where? To North York? So she probably wasn't right. But what it tells me is, here you have the beginning of racial difference and cultural difference, which will result in clashes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's the goal. I think there's a particularly intense goal in our country to create enough racial tension and chaos to institute martial law. That'll be one way to suspend the elections.
Yes. And in Germany you have the case where if you doubt the 6 million figure, and if you doubt that there were gas chambers, you can go to jail up to 5 years. But Ernst Zündel was put in jail in Germany 5 years after here in the Gulag in the single cell with a light all night, and I mean he was treated like a criminal. And Mr. Trudeau will have to apologize someday for what and make recompense what they did here. So this is something where not just in Germany, but in the European countries, you're not allowed to question these things, and you can go to jail or you're being fined, and many people's careers have been ruined because of that.
That's right.
And there are 20,000, 30,000 people who have been fined because of that in Germany.
Just fined.
Fined,
yeah. I was trying to get a number.
There's quite a number of people who've put into jail.
Yeah.
And this man Udo Vallendi, whose books Historical Truth I have here, he had to go to jail. Deckard had to go to jail. David Irving had to go to jail. Guillermo Rudolph. They all had to go to jail. And well, I would have liked to read the letter that Eric Margolis wrote in 1990. This fellow is also speaking the truth. He was in the, he wrote that in the Toronto Sun, and he was had a column there on Thursdays and Saturday and Sundays. Then the Thursdays was gone, and eventually Sundays was gone. And he was also on a TV program called Diplomatic Immunity, and he was gone from there because he was in disagreement with the Jewish lady from that runs the Monk Center. He had a disagreement with her, so he was gone from that. But he writes his every Sunday now. He writes an article, and you can read it in the internet. But here he writes about what happened to the Germans, and I made many prints of it, and I want to hand it out to as many people as possible. That's from 1990. Today, you would not be seeing anything like that in the papers.
That's right.
No way. No way. So the times have changed for the worse. It was 1945. The Red Army was looting and burning its way across eastern Germany. A close German friend told me what happened to her family. My aunt was gang raped by 26 Russian soldiers. By the time my uncle found her, she was bleeding to death and had gone insane. He held her in his arms and then shot her. We fled to Dresden thinking we'd be safe from the Russians. The city had no military targets, but was packed with terrified refugees from the east. 2 nights after the Allied firebombed Dresden, the rest of my family was burned alive. Take this one terrible and multiply it 12 million times. That is the number of Germans who were forced to flee for their lives in 1944-45 from the east. At least 6 million came from German Silesia, Pomerania, and East Prussia, now parts of Poland and the USSR. The Czechs expelled 3.5 million Germans from the Sudetenland. And here you should say that the guy who decreed that the Germans should be expelled, that is still Beneš, yeah, that decree still stands in the Czech Republic. So the Germans that were expelled, they are not, nobody is excusing themselves. They took over their homes where they had lived for 800 years. Other Germans fled from Hungary, Romania, and Yugoslavia. This titanic wave of refugees was the largest single movement of people in European history. So we must remember that. 2 million more German refugees died as they fled west through the ice and snow of the winter of 1944. Nearly all were women and children. They succumbed to hunger, disease, exposure, or were massacred. Another 2 million German females, from girls of 6 to women of 70, were raped by Russians and Poles. Yeah. Those writers who make their living spinning ever longer tales about the good Allies versus evil Germans have largely ignored the singular horrors that befell German civilians in 1944-45. But Germans have not forgotten. Deep in the German collective consciousness, a sharp anguish and melancholy over the loss of the real East Germany and its 12 million people. That is why West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl has been so reluctant to formally agree to the 1945 borders with Poland, which he did eventually. The flat, sandy lands stretching to the east and still haunted by German ghosts. What we call East Germany is not really East Germany at all. Now this is important. It is Middle Germany. The true eastern portion of Germany is Silesia, Pomerania, and Königsberg. Poles occupy the first 2 regions and the Soviets the latter. There are also the old German Baltic ports of like Memel, Reval, Stralsund, and the Baltic republics of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, which have deep German roots. 2 million Germans still live in the USSR. In 1989, some 380,000 ethnic Germans immigrated from the USSR, an exodus that dwarfs the much better publicized departure of Soviet Jews. More ethnic Germans have left the USSR and moved to West Germany than fled westwards from East Germany last year. Other ethnic Germans continue to leave Hungary, Romania, and Yugoslavia. In Poland, there are still at least 1 million ethnic Germans in Silesia and the Baltic. This has now dwindled to 300,000. A sizable German minority also exists in Czechoslovakia. Think of these scattered Germans as the lost Teutonic tribes of the East, phantoms all but forgotten by the West. Now that Middle Germany is finally reunifying with West Germany, thoughts must turn to the lost, separated part of Germany. The heirs of 12 and ready to remind those who forget about Germany's missing lands, and about the 1,000 years past in which German culture and power fought eastwards along the Baltic and deep into Central Europe, opposed at every step by the Slavic Poles and Russians. This ancient struggle is not about to vanish by the stroke of a pen. The Poles in particular are keenly aware that one day a muscular Germany may demand back the lost provinces of Silesia and Pomerania. This is why it makes a lot of sense for Poland to begin demanding that Moscow return the 1/3 of eastern Poland the Soviets annexed in 1939. Well, this is not quite true, because Poland annexed the Russian part in 1921. Stalin correctly predicted that by giving part of Germany to Poland, he would ensure that the Poles stay permanent Soviet allies. Well, he was wrong. But Poland will also remain permanently on edge until it makes an equitable territorial settlement with Germany. The Western media have been struck to condemn Chancellor Kohl for hemming and hawing on the border issue. Poland is having a nervous crisis and the Soviets are fretting. Why can't the Germans just accept reality, pay the price for their defeat and forever legitimize the 1945 border with Poland? In the end, Kohl will likely endorse the post-war border, which he did, but Germans who vote in a historical national election, that should shortly produce reunification. Keep hearing the special voices of the lost German tribes of the East, calling out in ghostly refrain, "Give us back Danzig, Königsberg, Breslau, and Stettin." Toronto Sun, March 18, 1990. Eric Margolis is foreign affairs columnist for the Toronto Sun. This is a book I have not read, because I have so many books. Karl Friedrich Grau, Silesian Inferno. I haven't read it.
How about your book?
The other book I would like to say to you is a lady, 92 years old. She published it 2 years ago. Lives in Vancouver on the West Coast, and I'm in correspondence with her.
This Silesian Inferno, War Crimes of the Red Army on its march into Silesia in 1945, a collection of documents with an introduction by Professor Ernst Doyerlein.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that its history is kind of coming to a climax at this point. But
I think so too.
What we are doing right now, and I want to thank you, Christian, for this interview and this time together, and we will get your information out as well.
Okay.
I want to thank you for joining us again, and we will continue with our interviews, and please join us again. Thank you.
I thank you.